Hello, and welcome back to Corpse Party Blood Drive. It's been a while since I've uploaded a video on this, so I'm going to continue the series. Being that this game is older, I'm going to introduce it into a series named A Blast from the Past, because when did this game come out? Hold on. Let me see, when did this game come out? I know it's like a pretty old game, but let's see. Let's see. Yeah, this game came out in 2014, so yeah. It's a bit of an old game, but it's still pretty good. Anyway, we're going to be starting on Chapter 1 today. Returning. A day had passed since the events at a word I can't pronounce, South Apartments. Shimorenjaku, I guess you could say. This was to be a significant turning point for me, and Mochida might have been a part of it from the start, except that fate seemed to have other plans for him.
クオン先生、今日は大事な用があって。
You good, Satoshi?
ダメ。サトシ君、昨日の唾液の小テスト、ちょっと残念な点数だったでしょ？今から1時間、私の授業に集中しなさい。そうしたら、次の小テストも解けるようになるから。
Alright then.
先生って英語科でしょ？唾液なんて専門外じゃ。
I don't think she cares, Satoshi, just saying.
一生懸命教えるからできるよ。
Alright, well.
いや、先生、クオン先生ってユイ先生そっくりだな。
I'm thinking that, like, in this alternate reality that Miss Yui and Seiko don't exist, this is their replacement. Because he's saying that her and Miss Yui are alike, so they gotta be the replacements.
ごめんなさい。
Oh. Looking both bemused and guilty, Mochida tried to get up and leave his seat in one swift motion, but he was easily caught, lifted up, and forcefully sat back down.
ダメ。
Dang. Miss Kuon was smiling. She was actually enjoying this. Oh boy.
なんだこの先生。
I mean, she literally had somebody deliver your lunch to you in a helicopter, if you remember that. Miss Kuon was only the slightest bit taller than Mochida. This did make her taller than the average, but her arms were small and frail. There seemed to be no way she could possibly have lifted someone of his build. This whole situation was rather bewildering for him, and he made no attempt to hide his confusion.
さあ、始めるよ。
Okay. He had no other option. Apparently he was going to be studying algebra for the next hour, come hell or high water. Meanwhile, at a local cafe near the school, Kishinuma and I were sitting down to speak to Aiko Niwa, the informant who had led my friends to me the previous night.
大丈夫？お腹でも痛いの？
I responded with a dismissive gesture while continuing to rub my abdomen with my other hand. Ever since the previous night, I'd had this constant, unbearable urge to... Oh, okay.
昨日怖い思いして過呼吸が続いたから。
What the hell is wrong with me? I mean, I know I got really scared and I hyperventilated, but can that affect my body like this? Did it change something in me?
ずっと膀胱が膨らんでる気がする。
Bladder feels like it's fit to burst. Alright, well...
何から話そうかしら。
Alright. Let's see here. Charting it from her gaze. Is that right?
いいえ、大したことはしていないわ。
Let's see.
茨城学園って案外広いので、岸沼くんと。
Let's see.
あゆみちゃん、岸沼くん。
You two are
あなたたち
Oh!
天神小学校の生還者。
Oh, they both realize that now. So the fact that she knows, she too must have been there. Because she said she was a friend of Naho. So she had to have known about Heavenly Host.
なんであんたそのことを。
Oh,
あなたたち死後の世界に接してきたでしょう。通常人間には身につかないオーラの色をしているわ。私には見える。
interesting. Both Kishinuma and I were speechless. I just sat there staring at my palm, subconsciously trying to see my aura, I guess. Aiko was smiling at us triumphantly.
愛子さんは霊能関係の情報屋でナホさんのお友達なんですよね。ええ、ナホちゃん。
That's correct. I'm the one who tipped her
天
off
神
about
小学校
Heavenly
の情報を提供
Host
したのは
Elementary.
私。
Uh-oh. The true source of the deaths and subsequent erasures that had turned our lives into a living nightmare that was if I could speak English, was the Sachiko Ever After ritual posted on Naho's occult blog. I had been a fan of Naho's for quite some time, so when I saw that, I knew I had to try it out with my friends for Class 2-9, and as a result, half of those friends were now gone.
ナホちゃんがキビキ先生のために霊能探偵をやっていたことは知っているわよね。
Yeah, Mr. Kibiki, yeah.
はい。幸せの幸子さんの情報が掲載されてから。私はね、心霊スポットや霊能関係の情報を集めて、それを欲しがる人に有償で提供してきた。
So she is a supernatural agent. I see.
報酬はお金、もしくは私の興味をそそる霊具の類。相手によってふっかけ方も変わるけ
Dirty
れど。
work. Oh.
まあ、ギブアンドテイクよね。向こうは情報が欲しい。
Artifact. Oh. Physically, Aiko was a very attractive young lady, but personality-wise, the jury was still out. Her words were calculated and emotionless. Her true intentions, a mystery.
だから私は情報屋をやっているの。ナホちゃんもいいお客さんだったわ。あの子が最後に買ったのが天神小学校
Well,
の。
yeah. Because she went to Heavenly Host, and yeah.
ナホちゃん、これでキビキ先生の小説がなんとか賞を取れるってすごくはしゃいでた。
Is that right?
ねえ、教えてくれる？あなたナホさんは
Oh.
キビキ先生と一緒に
She
亡くなって
died.
いました。
Yeah. I looked down as I answered. Despite everything she'd done, the memory of Naho's passing was still painful for me. She'd become one of the Heavenly Host's lost souls and gone completely berserk. In the end, I was the one who finished her off.
そう、やっぱりね。
Dang, you assumed as much. Is that right? Aiko seemed completely unaffected by this revelation. Her tone remained even, and her expression cold and distant. Honestly, I'd had about enough of her by this point. She was so devoid of empathy, it was almost offensive. I was genuinely starting to get pissed off.
平気なんですか？残念だと思うわ。
Oh.
でも予想はついていたからわざわざ取り乱す必要もないでしょ。
Okay, well. Kishinuma continued to stare intently at Aiko with his own brand of cold, emotionless eyes. He was oddly quiet, though his anger was palpable. I clenched my fist.
じゃ、この子はおまじないを一緒に行ったと思うんだけど、あっちにはいたかしら。
Oh. I remember her. She was Naho's friend.
いえ、会ってないからわかりません。そう。
I see. Aiko's expression was so unfaltering. You could carve it in stone. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something.
ナホさんのことお客さんだなんて。その
My voice was breaking with rage, but even if that hadn't been the case, my face must have read like a book. This icy fish may have had only one expression, but I sure didn't.
あら、あなたは客って言葉に対して随分と偏見を持っているのね。取引を行う以上、 私はそこに最大の誠意と協力を
Dang,
提供
she's
する
really cold,
つ
dude.
まりそれがパートナーとしての信用でフレンドシップにも負けないものだと思っているけれど、そんなこと
Mm-hmm. I had no idea what to say. It seemed like Aiko was used to this sort of thing. Her response felt carefully rehearsed, like a sales pitch. Finally, Kishinuma broke his silence.
あんたよ、昨日篠崎を助けてくれたことは感謝するけどよ、金やなんかの見返りのためにそんなろくでもない情報を拡散させるなんて旗迷惑だと思わねえ
He
のか。
does have a point.
情報は情報よ。それ自
Okay.
体に罪はないわ。道具と同じ。それをどう使うかは使い手のその気になれば、その辺にあるコップでも人は殺せてしまうのよ。
んなもん詭弁じゃねえかよ。
Oh, he's pissed off now.
あなたもそう思う？あゆみちゃん。ごめんなさい。私はあなたの考え方。
Dang. Her expression remained calm and collected overall, but her eyes blinked several times in rapid succession. It was the first outward sign of emotion we'd seen from her.
やれやれ、ひどい嫌われようね。慣れてるけど悲しいわ。
Aika quickly shrugged off her sudden outburst and was back to her usual icy self.
天神書は俺らがぶっ壊してきたからいいけどよ。
An awkward tension filled the room, or at least our table.
じゃ、本題に入りましょうか。
Aiko produced a thick, hardbound file folder from the light blue bag she'd brought with her. She opened it to reveal several documents of a questionable nature. Among them were what looked to be a family tree, as well as numerous pages featuring black magic symbology, or images that looked like tree branches.
黒魔術の文字対応表。
So her family tree.
少しショッキングなことを伝えるわね。
Aiko was looking directly into my eyes now. Her gaze was fixed and intense and unblinking.
さっ
Ooh.
き岸沼くんが言ったことだけれど、間違いよ。
Oh! Huh?
何がだよ。
天神小学校は壊れてなどいない。今もまだ存在し続けている。
Dang! So this is why they go back.
これを見て。
Take a look at this. Ooh. Oh! Yep. Ooh.
天神小学校。
なんだよこれ。
Where did that come from?
パリ。これは私が念写
It's a
したものよ。
photograph. Ooh.
力が足りなくて少し不鮮明ではあるけれど。一体どういうことなんですか？
I can't even describe what was going through my head at that moment. I felt like I was about to burst. Aiko, however, remained calm as ever while recounting her story.
順を追って説明するわね。まず、昨日の例の赤い箱だけれど。
The box I'd found on Makina's futon. Inside it were apparently two stones resembling magatama, I guess? Comma-shaped ceremonial objects from Japanese antiquity. Also included with the box, in the box, were several more roughly hewn stones, as well as a lining along the edges consisting of crumpled pieces of thin, white paper.
残念ながら箱の中でほとんど割れていたけれど、この一組は無事だったわ。
Oh, that's the thing. Okay, that's the thing from the, what's it called? From the main menu, yeah. Aiko now held one stone in each of her hands, and was motioning them toward one another as if to drive that point home.
霊具というのはね、簡単に言えば死者の思いが込められたもののことで、物に閉じ込められた霊、またはその生前の記憶が持つ者に永遠と泣き言を語りかけてくる。いうか私はこう見えて無類の。
Interesting. Kishinuma and I briefly locked eyes again. We shared the same look of bewilderment. Aiko's personality was much more twisted than either of us had initially perceived it to be.
この子の意思を読もうとするとね、諸わしい声と一緒におさげの少女や廃校の風景が見えてきたのよ。で、気になったからこのカメラに。
At this, she produced an old instant camera and placed it on the table in front of us.
私の念を写してみたの。それがその写真。私がこのレーグを使ってその時の今現在を念写したものよ。過去や未来の時間を超えた念写は私にはできないから。
Interesting. I examined the photograph in greater detail and a chill ran down my spine. There was absolutely no denying what it depicted. I was actually shaking.
篠崎幸子を失ったあの学校は私たちが逆落ちで脱出した際にでも寸前のところでとどまったってところかしら。私に語りかけてくる
Aiko motioned towards the photo in my hands.
写真の女の子とか
Isn't that the girl that brought them back? The answer was beginning to dawn on me. A sudden cold sensation exploded through my body and I shuddered, as if trying to shake off the encroaching realization.
あの地獄みたいな場所がまだそう。
I don't know. It could be. She's got evidence that it is, so might be. Kishinuma leaned forward. The conversation was clearly beginning to engage him a lot more than it had been.
その天神小学校いえ学校の形をしたあの異空間だけれどあの異空間の正体はね涅槃という死後の世界に近い磁場なのよ。普通はこの世とは別の次元に存在するものなのだけれど涅槃ええ
Oh, Yoshi's her mom.
知っているはい篠崎の家ヨシエの診療所に黒の本と呼ばれる
Yep. Why? How could she know about that? A million thoughts, a million questions were running through my head. I was speechless. All I could do was sit there and hear her out. Oh. It was like a muffled scream, or a moan of agony, the sound you make when you want to make a sound but are barely able to. That one was a little more forceful, accompanied by thrashing. It caused a nearby table light to fall over and roll on the ground.
あなた落ち着いてお願い
This was Yoshi Shinozaki's clinic, and Yoshi herself was on top of her husband, holding him down with both of her hands. She continued her Shinto purification chant. To prevent Seiji from biting off his own tongue, he had been gagged with a towel. Needless to say, he wasn't looking particularly well. Not far from where this was occurring, Sachiko stood aghast, trembling as she watched the proceedings with hesitant, sidelong glances. Oh. You just said that fast as hell. Okay then. Seiji, still collapsed on the floor, was clearly suffering. His body was bent into a most unnatural shape, and he was fervently clawing at his neck. Sheesh. Okay. Sachiko's father screamed through the gag, foam beginning to froth out from its edges. He was going into cyanosis. Okay. Okay then, yeah. Traditionally blackened teeth. That's okay then. The atmosphere within the room was heavy, as if spirits occupied every empty corner, dancing and flitting about freely and joyously. Seiji's body sharply bent and began
あり
convulsing.
ませる払い戸の狼たち。あなたしっかり。ああ、三親の御霊様、お願いです。連れて行かないでください。
Oh. Oh! Her great-grandmother, Seira, the head of the Shinozaki family... Okay, you're just gonna keep laughing. Anyway, was among the black-teeth woman laughing joyously at Seiji's suffering.
お父さん、お父さん。
He's dying. Yep. His voice began to weaken and his convulsions began to lose strength. Finally, the last spark of life had left his body. His eyes rolled back into his head and all movement ceased.
お父さん、息してないよ。
Oh. Sachiko looked up, her eyes glazed over with tears. Yoshi, too, was stricken with grief and despair.
霊能力者の血筋篠崎の者と結婚した夫は必ず早々の死を遂げる。呪われた家の運命に抗えなかった義恵は、心ない者たちから守るよう篠崎の家に託されていた禁忌の本に手を、
Huh.
それが黒の本、ブック・オブ・シャドウズ。
Interesting.
愛する者を失う、そのことを恐れるあまり黒魔術に頼ったの。まさに荒唐無稽でバカな話を義恵自身もすがれる者なら何でもいい程度にしか思っていなかったと思うわ。
Aiko stared deeply into my eyes, seemingly fishing for a reaction to her tale.
ところがまさか信じられない。
I continued listening, unknowingly stroking the wound on my thigh as unpleasant memories of my own foolish run-in with black magic resurfaced.
義恵の体に流れる篠崎の血筋、その強い霊力に想像もつかない何かが呼応して、それは
Heavenly host.
義恵の術で本の中から呼び覚まされた未来永劫、死者と共にいられる場所、死後の世界を知
So
り
did
取った
Yoshi
空
create
間が
Heavenly
この
Host
世に
then?
生まれてしまったの。
Interesting.
義恵はもう半分正気を失っていたのね。一人娘の幸子を現世に残してランド・オブ・コープス。ところが涅槃には意志があり、義恵の手でコントロールできるものではなかったの。
Interesting. I knew that all too well. Just like Yoshi, I'd experienced my own tragic failure with black magic at the Shinozaki Clinic.
黒魔術には障害反動がある。夫の魂はバラバラに飛散し、義恵の命も消えかけた。自分の愚かな行為を悔やみながら呼吸を止めようとしたその時、底なしに霊能力の強い一人娘幸子が涅槃を丸ごと体の中に飲み込んだの。
Interesting. So if Sachiko absorbed it, the poor girl collapsed to the floor, violently thrashing about as the weight of an entire dimension crushed her from the inside. This action had saved her mother's life, certainly, but death would have surely been preferable. Picking herself up, Yoshi rushed to her daughter's side in tears.
幸子、さっちゃん、あなたお母さん死なないで、お母さん。
Dang. Both parent and child were bawling, pain mixing with relief, mixing with pain again. The little girl buried her face into Yoshi's bosom and just cried and cried. Yoshi grasped her tightly in both arms, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. By this point, Sachiko's body had begun producing a dark blue
ご
aura.
めんね、さっちゃん。ごめんね。お母さん間違ってた。 お母さんにはあなたがいるわ。もうあなたを置いていこうだなんて。
Okay.
あなたも知っての通り、
As you know,
幸子
Sachiko
も
is a
篠崎
direct
と当時
descendant of the
家の血を引
Shinozaki
くサブ
line.
レッド
A thoroughbred. Yep.
ヨシエを超えるほどの霊能力を持っていたのね
Okay. Yeah.
涅槃を丸ごと体内に封じ込めるなんてものすごいことよ。
Right. Aiko took a big, noisy sip from her coffee mug.
ほとんど最強の霊能者だったんじゃないかしら。でもその幸子が死んでしまって。そう、保健医ヨシエの転落事故と同時に幸子が行方不明になった。あれは
They were both
校
killed
長
by
に
the
よる殺
principal.
人。やはりそうなのね。校長が余計なことをしでかしたおかげで幸子の中に吸い込まれて封印されていた涅槃が復活し、あの異空間
Right.
天神小学校が生まれてしまう。
So I thought that's exactly what happened. So yeah, it's probably because the school took this was a. It's probably because the school was the site of Sachiko's violent demise that her nirvana took on its form.
とはいえ復活した涅槃も資料として蘇った幸子の力で再び抑制されて、幸子が
Interesting.
そのね
This was all starting to make a sick sort of sense. The pieces were falling into place and painting an absolutely awful picture. I shuddered to myself as I considered it.
現在はあなたたちが脱出の際に幸子を取り除いてしまったから、涅槃は再び暴走状態になってしまえばよかったのに。あんな危険な場所。
This entire conversation was a roller coaster of emotions for me. At this point, I was just angry. Angry at everyone involved in this whole ordeal, myself included.
さて、ここで少し突飛な話をするわよ。ついてきてね。はい、死んだ友達に。
Would you like to see your dead friends again? Oh! That certainly got our attention. We both perked our heads up
涅
immediately.
槃で死んだ霊は成仏できずに囚われ続けるというわ。お友達の魂だってまだあそこにいるかもしれん。実はね、黒の本ブックオブシャドウズには色ヨシエの使った涅槃を生み出す術の他にも
Spell of
暗号術というもの
revival?
もある。
Nakashima and I knew about that one all too well.
命を無理やり戻すなんて敬虔な宗教家に言わせれば神のお示しに背く背徳の行為だと言われそうだけれどね。
は
He's just so confused. What? Kishinima seemed a bit more confused than he probably should have been, though I suspect the look on my face may have had something to do with that. Aiko grinned at me, and I had the sinking suspicion it was because she somehow knew what I was thinking, though I couldn't be sure, and I certainly didn't know how she
け
would.
れどそんなものはクソくらいよね。冒涜も破壊も何でも来いよ。死んだ友達を生き返らせたいんでしょ。
Oh.
だったらあの本を探し出し天神小学校でもう一度あの術を行えば成功。
おいあんた、
Oh.
何無責任なこと言ってやがんだ。
I didn't exactly mean to interrupt Kishinuba, but quite honestly, I didn't even realize he was talking. I was too focused on what Aiko had just said.
知っているんですね。
Yeah, she knows. Aiko tilted her head at me, that same wry smile creeping across her face. She'd gone from cold and emotionless to knowing and expressive in a mere instant.
あの時のことは夢幻だったと思っています。ありえないものを見てありえない体験をしてしてはいけないこと、そんなことでも現実だった。
It was real. I could feel that touch deep within my soul. I suddenly found myself swallowing my next breath, practically choking on
い
thin
い
air.
人が本来触れることすらできない世の女今さら逃げられると思う。
I looked down again, trying my best to avoid Aiko's gaze.
私にそんなことが。
When had I started crying? I raised my head again, intent upon looking deep into Aiko's eyes as she answered my question, but she looked so blurry through my tears. I could tell, though, that she was smiling at me. It was the same expression. Her new standard.
そんなことで何？
今
うん何？
Oh.
あなたの口からちゃんと聞きたいな。どうしたいの？
Bro.
帰らってよく言えました。
Oh boy. Aiko patted my head as one might a dog's after a successfully performed trick.
黒の本が生み出すのは魔女の英知が起こす奇跡よ。それは運命をもねじ曲げる力。たとえそれが確定した運命であろうともね。あなたは強力な霊能者の家系篠崎家の末裔。
Interesting. My confidence was being bolstered by the minute. Though in retrospect, that was likely Aiko's aim. Nonetheless, if there was still something I could do for my friends.
だけど肝心のブックオブシャドウズがどこに。
幸子を失った天神賞には幸せの幸子さんのおまじないではもういけない。
She already knows.
この学校で神野由紀ちゃんという女の子に聞きました。
Interesting. Aiko once again placed the bluish-white magmanta stones from the box in either hand. This time fitting them together, though not quite the way they were supposed to interlock.
そこでこれよ。
それは
ものすごい霊力を持ってる。さすが篠
Interesting.
崎の霊具ね。声が教えてくれたわ。これは幸せ。
Ever After stones. Ooh.
幸せの石。
I leaned forward despite myself. The name sent a shiver down my spine, but now that I heard it, I had to know more.
この石は2つで1つなの。これをパズルのようにくっつけて「涅槃よ死人を迎えよ」と唱えれば触れている者みんながいつでも天神小学校へ飛べるわ。
We both flinched at her chant, but Aiko just smiled. She must have intentionally oriented the stones the wrong way so the charm wouldn't activate.
戻る時も不思議でしょ。この子が教えてくれたのよ。
Aiko gazed longingly at the stones. She was clearly, utterly enamored by them. It seemed as if they were the key factors in unleashing her newfound emotional expressiveness. But my focus was elsewhere. Without a doubt, the items Aiko now held in her left hand were extraordinarily dangerous, possibly the most dangerous horrific objects in the entire world. However, while Aiko was oogling them with her left hand, her right hand was feeling around for something in her breast pocket. She slowly removed it, producing an old black and white photograph. When had she taken that? It was the same photograph I'd seen at Makina Shinozaki's house the previous night. Interesting.
10代だった篠崎義恵は叔母の牧野のことを慕ってよく家に遊びに行っていたそうよ。世界的に有名な霊能師の家系である篠崎家。ここならとヤゴーラ教会の生き残り
Ooh.
ヤゴーラの沖縄が危険だからとマルトバから盗み出してきたブック・オブ・シャドウズを預けに来たんだけれど、それが揃うと危ないからと石は牧野が、本は義恵が預かって保管することに決めたそうよ。
So Makina had the stones, and that's why she had them in that box. Yagoura Society? Martubas? I'd never heard these terms before at all. And then there was that damned Book of Shadows again. Why did that have to keep coming up?
あなたたちはあの学校から篠崎幸子を取り除いた。それにこれまでのような一方通行ではなく現世に戻ってくることができる。 この世のものではない異空間心霊スポットが生まれている。
She thrust the Ever After Stones towards me triumphantly and continued to make her pitch, growing more excited by the second. I was legitimately speechless. What could I say?
わかるかしら。まさにあの場所は宝の山よ。これまで眉唾、嘘800と笑われていた霊魂の世界への扉が開いたの。世界中のオカルト研究が一気に加速するわ。私はね、
Oh.
商売としてあの空間へ人を連れて行くツアーコンダクターをやろう。
Oh my god. Kishinuma and I both reacted to this preposterous suggestion with a start. She couldn't possibly be serious, could she?
ナホちゃんのブログからは片白のデータは削除したし、あの手段ではもう飛べない。行く方。
What could she possibly have been thinking? I wanted to stop her at once. I wanted to take those stones and break them right there on the spot before anyone else got hurt.
私
But
は
I...
ね、ツアーを運営するにあたって安全を確保したいの。あゆみちゃんはお友達の霊を探したいでしょ。だったらあの空間の再調査は共通の目的にならない。
Aiko leaned in as she spoke, her breath scented with the sugary sweetness of the extravagant desserts we'd been eating tickled my nose.
ね、あゆみちゃん。私と一緒にもう一本来は片白を引きちぎる方法でツアーをやろうと思っていたんだけど、こんな便利なアイテムが見つかっちゃったんだもの。これはもう運命よ。
Aiko seemed like she was on top of the world, but that just made me all the more disgusted with
ど
her.
うかしら。
On the other hand, she was offering me a chance to save our lost friends, and however remote that chance may have been, it stacked the odds frustratingly in her favor. I still couldn't just say yes, but I also couldn't say no. Honestly, I resented Aiko for putting me in this position. I glared at her for a moment before I said anything.
すぐに答えを出せるわけがないでしょ。返させてください。
I'd almost forgotten Kishinuma was there. Sudden waves of guilt washed over me. He had an incredibly... if I could speak. He had an absolutely incredulous look on his face. I couldn't bear to see it, so I looked
ブ
away.
ックオブシャドウズだってどこにあるかわからないし、そもそもその石だって本当にそんな力があるかも実際に試したわけじゃないのでしょ。
I mean, didn't she? She oriented the two stones so they'd form a perfect yin-yang symbol, and then slotted them together once again. Immediately, the stones began glowing with a bluish-white hue, and a stream of energy started to form around her.
マジかよ。
Aiko continued smiling and looked directly into my eyes.
いいわ、ゆっくり考えて。この石はもちろんまだ試していないからどれだけ危険かわからないしね。
She slowly separated the two stones as she said this, and the energy surrounding her dissipated.
篠崎家の血
But
筋
they're from the house
篠崎
home
牧
of
野の家で
Makina
発見されたんだもの。
Shinozaki, right?
きっと信憑性も霊言も新たかな霊具に違いないわ。
Yeah.
すげえな。ちょ
Interesting.
っと見せてくれよ。
Kishinuma didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed the Ever After stones from Aiko's hands and began examining them carefully.
あの箱の中に。あんたさ、まさかこの石を独り占めしようなんて。
Aiko seemed taken aback by the question. Way to go, Kishinuma. You managed to catch her off guard.
これを見つけられたのは、半分は篠崎が体張ったおかげなんだろ。
Aiko seemed to ponder these words for a moment.
じゃあお互い勝手に行けないように一つずつ持っていましょうか。
Okay.
わかりました。
Alright.
ちょうだい。岸沼君。
So she's taking one.
おう
Kishinuma plopped one of the stones into my hand and then slipped the other one back into the drawstring pouch Aiko had brought them in and closed it up. He then casually handed the pouch back to its rightful owner.
その気になったら連絡をちょうだい。そうね。サービスとしてブックオブシャドウズの捜索は
Aiko flashed us the biggest, most gregarious smile I think I'd ever seen.
あの本さえ見つかれば一緒に行ってくれるのよね、あゆみ。
I closed my eyes and gave something like a half-hearted half nod, lowering my head without raising it again. It was interpreted as a yes, but I'm not sure I meant it that way.
ぐっと。じゃ、ここは私が出しておくわね。
Aiko got up and grabbed the check.
いえ、私も出します。
I took out my wallet. I had no desire to owe this person anything. Aiko just
それ
smiled.
じゃ割り勘ってことで。そうそう。これ
Aiko handed her thoughtograph to me.
嫌だわ。そんなに構えないで。これは無料で差し上げるわ。だから安心して。
She's really cold, dude.
最低だよ、あの人。
あ
Both of y'all do.
鈴本さんや篠原さん、森重君、ゆい先生、みんなのことが終わったら、この一週。
あ、ああ、その意見には俺も同感だ。両方ともぶっ壊す案だ。
Oh! So he took the other one.
あの学校のヤバさも知らねえで浮かれてやがったからな。こっそりいただいてきたぜ。
死ぬまくん、すごい
Bro.
悪い人。
Bro! How are you gonna do that?
緊急事態によりやむなしだ。けど吉野崎、鈴本たちのことはもう考えない方がいいんじゃねえか。無茶ばっかしてお前がまた死ぬ思いするとかよ。鈴本も結衣先生も。
Yeah?
そうじゃない。
いい加減にしろ篠崎。
He's getting mad
私は
now.
中島がどんだけお前のこと心配してると思って。
ごめんなさい。でも、お願い、岸沼くん。もう少しだけ、
Hmm.
もう少しだけでいいから、私の気の済む。
Alright.
よーいいか。
And the head pat.
大丈夫だ。
Bruh. Like, those two, they need... I think those two are going to get together. They have to at this point. Like, as soon as they break the curse of, like, of her bloodline, I think they're actually going to get together. The delinquent and the class rep. Because, you know, that is the most unexpected relationship to start building, but then again, in this game, it's expected at the same time. I turned my gaze at the meat Kishinumas. My eyes must have looked like saucers, windows into a mind full of worries, ideas, and fears spurred by this unexpected turn of events.
なんかあったらすぐ連絡しろよ。前みたいに目つぶって突っ走って勝手に死にそうになってんじゃねえぞ。俺だって、お前一人くらい守れる自信はあんだからよ。
Dang. Kishinuma patted me on the head reassuringly as he said this, and I had no idea how to react. I felt warm and safe, but also a little annoyed, much like a younger sister being simultaneously comforted and scolded by her big brother. All I could say in response was... just okay. I could feel my eyes still bulging from my head, opened as far as my eyelids would allow. I imagined how I must have appeared to Kishinuma and was momentarily embarrassed.
んじゃ、そろそろ帰るとするか。
Oh, I can move now. Hello. Okay. Cool. Hang on. Okay, so basically, I think there's something I need to look for here. I can look for stuff, I guess. Don't mind me, I'm just going across the street. Oh, where are all the people? The streets seem unusually quiet. Is it just because of the late hour? There's only one person there. Okay, so it's not here. So let's check over here. I remember running up these stairs with Mayu Suzumoto. At the time, it never dawned on me that the legitimacy of those memories could ever be called into question. Why would it? When you graduate, transfer, or get married, you're always still able to see one another as long as you're both alive. But in this reality, it's as if Suzumoto never even existed. Okay, so now there might be one across the street over there. Over this way. No? Nothing? Okay. Alright, so let's just walk then. Nope. 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 There you go, Ayumi. You got it. Try to speed it up a little bit here. Okay, I think we're good now. Alright.
ただいま。おかえり。
You don't have shoes on in the first place, Ayumi. What are you
今日の
doing?
検視速報です。死亡した岡部さんは背骨が折れた状態で都内のこの場所で発見され、
A broken spine. A Tokyo map was displayed on the television screen, marked with 2 red dots. The marquee at the bottom provided the headline, Sudden Violent Deaths Remain Unexplained.
ご飯はまだ少し時間かかるから。うん。
I think I may have to... Oh, she took her socks off. Without thinking, I'd left the socks I just removed from my feet on the living room floor.
あれ。どうした？うん。
Yeah, get your socks, Ayumi. I'm probably gonna have to cut this part out. I don't know. This was a bad habit of mine, so ingrained within me that it had almost become ritual. Mom did well to have caught it so quickly. I grabbed my socks and left the room.
みんなの魂がいる天神症でブックオブシャドウズを使えば今度こそ生き返らせることができるか。
I set my bag down in my room quickly and automatically grabbed my sweatpants and spats and made a beeline for the bathroom. When I got there, I threw my socks into the hamper with purpose and then began peeling off my school uniform. As I observed myself in the mirror, I began to murmur.
障害反動。もしあれがまた起こったら。
She does have that mark on her neck, you can see it. Those burn marks on my neck and arms were eternal reminders of what I'd been through at the Shinozaki estate. I could clearly remember the agony I went through as they'd formed. I remember watching them sear into my flesh out of thin air, blood spurting from them as if I'd been knifed. I only survived because Hinoe sacrificed herself in my place.
やるしかないじゃない。
I tried to force self-confidence into my expression. When it wouldn't come, I slapped my cheeks hard. It was in me somewhere. It just needed to be yanked out into the open.
あなたが頑張るのよ。
Hey guys, so this is going to be post-editing, but basically, I just wanted to explain the reason why there's like a major cut here. So, I really didn't want to show this on a YouTube video, but, so basically, you already saw Ayumi was already taking off her clothes and all that, and I didn't want to show that on YouTube, so yeah. I went ahead and cut that out, and there was also a bunch of dialogue that I cut out too, because Ayumi's sprite was wearing literally nothing but a towel, so yeah. I didn't want to show that on YouTube either, but I'm just putting this in to explain what happened in that dialogue. So basically she was psyching herself up, we saw that, and then she got in the tub and was thinking about like, okay, how am I going to do this? And then that guy that appeared in her room in Chapter 0, when she was like punching the wall and everything, he came back and began trying to get her to go ahead and get into Heavenly Host. And basically, you know, it turned, you know, since she was just in a towel, she basically called him a pervert and all that stuff. And, you know, he jumped out the window. Ayumi's mom came in, and then we have the cut going to Yoshiki in the store. So, like I said, this is post editing. I just wanted to go ahead and just tell you guys why I made this huge cut, because I had a feeling it was coming, and it was coming. So yeah. Anyway, that's it, and back to the video. It was late at night, and I still hadn't been bothered changing out of my school uniform. I needed food, though, so I decided to hit up the convenience store on my way back home. I'd picked up a bottle of olives, a pack of tofu, some mineral water, and other various things to keep me going for a while. The hell's this? I could hardly believe it. There was actually There was actually an occult section at the damn mini-mart, with all kinds of stupid stuff like spirit talisman magnets and anti-demon wards. I grabbed one off the shelf and looked at the company logo on the backside. PO Promotions Co. Incorporated. For these last 2 months since we'd gotten back from Heavenly Host, it seemed like there was a real spiritual boom going on all over the world. Whenever there'd be a strange death or something, the public would be all over it, downright excited about the possibility that it might be supernatural in nature. It was all over TV shows and magazines too, with independent researchers checking out the spiritual hotspots and giving fancy New Age advice to people just to boost ratings or sales. And now this, exorcism merchandise next to prepackaged cupcakes and ready-made dinners.
コンビニでお札が買える時代かよ。ちょっと前までなら、こんなもの見ても気持ちはこんなの本物相手に聞くのかよ。
The item I was examining happened to be one of the spirit talisman magnets, seemingly the last one in stock. Oh! An old lady suddenly reached around me from behind and yanked it right out of my hands. Whoa. Oh. She glowered at me for a moment before taking her prize over to the register. And I just stood there, staring blankly at her as she walked away.
なんだよ。
ありがとうございました。
Okay. So what item? Oh, we're controlling Yoshiki now. Awesome. Can I run over this? It's late. I just want to go home, I think. Okay, so yeah, I have to go this way.
Kishinuma-kun.
Oh.
篠崎。
Oh.
何してんのこんな時間に。
ごめんね。こんな遅くに。
ああ、今日は遅番だったからな。で、まさかずっと待って。
It was actually a really chilly night. I could see Shinozaki's breath dissipating around her chin in short, frequent bursts.
平気じゃねえだろ。震えてんじゃねえか。
My room was on the second floor of the apartment building. I hadn't been expecting guests, but I had just tidied up for my own sake a little while back, so it was fairly presentable. Shinozaki immediately sat down on my bed and began sipping the tea I had made for her. She was holding it in both hands, probably less for politeness and more just to warm them up.
おいしい。
変だろ。
Isn't it?
妹がいつも送ってくんだよ。いい茶話。
Interesting. The sound of a large truck driving by seemed to catch her off guard. She was clearly a bit jittery. Unsurprising, all things considered.
こんな時間まで工事してるんだ。
ああ、年末近くになるとこういう意味のない工事増えるな。うるさいわ、眩しいわでね。
大変。
Time passed us by at a snail's pace. Shinozaki continued to sip her tea, never once removing either hand from the warm cup. She definitely had something on her mind. Something had happened. It was written all over her
親
face.
に断ってきてんの。
連絡は大丈夫。
そうか。
They do? Shinozaki was in my room. I dreamed about this before, but never thought it would actually happen.
マジか。なんだな。あ、いや、その
Oh, don't get all blushy on me, Yoshiki. Come on, bro.
どうしたんだよこんな遅くに。なんかあったのか？はあ？今から展示所に行くだ？
His reaction is great. I was half acting as if mentally this wasn't entirely unexpected. Shinozaki may have been a lot of things, but unpredictable is not among them.
お願い。
で、いいか篠崎。確かにこの位置はさっき光ってたし、何か力はあるかもしれねえ。だがよ、また出られなくなって下手したら今度こそ死んじまう。そうなりゃ、
Alright.
ここでのお前の存在まで消え。
I tried to be as strong and commanding as I could possibly muster. I needed her to realize what a bad idea this
私
was.
の存在なんていい。
救う？
黒の本。ブックオブシャドウズのあり。
That book you were talking about earlier?
あ、
私たち、実はもうさっき見えていたのよ。この女の子の左手のところ。それが、
Hmm.
本か。確かに持ってるな。
ないけど。でも、多分
多分ってお前。
You don't think?
天神賞へはね、この本を取り戻しに行くの。そしたら、
How could I argue with that? There were so many assumptions being made, but she was so sure of herself, so certain that this would work. She wasn't about to listen to reason. Shinozaki shook her head furiously, like some sort of violent shudder. It almost seemed like she was trying to shake something loose from her mind.
か。そもそもこんな石で本当に展示所に行けるの？
それは試してみなきゃだけれど。でももしまた天神賞に行けたら。
篠崎。
She still had deep scars all along her arms, legs, and neck. Anyone could tell at a glance that she just recovered from a serious accident. She sounded so self-assured, so self-confident, but it was hard to take any of that seriously. This was the first time in my life I found myself tearing up over someone and not being embarrassed that I was crying. Honestly, it surprised me, even me, how deeply I cared about her, Shinozaki, and just how much I just didn't want to lose her. My eyes were getting hot and glazed, and I felt utterly helpless.
こんなこと誰にも話せないけど、あなたは
I was at a complete loss for words. I found myself literally scratching my head, trying to come up with a good answer. This was Shinozaki, and she had come to me for moral support, for encouragement, for peace of mind. It was really the first time she'd ever truly relied on me, ever truly counted on me. I knew then what I had to do.
もうよ、あのクソ学校であんな目に遭って帰ってきたの。今さら何があっても驚きゃしねえよ。理解はできないけどな。できないままに俺は
決めたこと。
ああ、何があってもお前を守るってよ。
Yoshiki, let's go! Oh, he got her blushy face now. Shinozaki and I stared into each other's eyes for a moment, each of us trying to figure the other out.
心配すんな。
I tried to force a smile. Shinozaki had basically curled up into a ball at this point, her tiny body collapsed on itself for support. But now, all of a sudden, she unfurled herself and glared at me. I couldn't tell if she was mad or happy, or what. Her eyes were either like daggers or saucers. I couldn't really make out which. Maybe she'd come here expecting me to actively shoot down her ideas or something. Maybe she thought she'd be alone in this. Maybe she figured out what I was up to. Or maybe she'd been expecting me to say exactly what I'd said to her, and maybe it annoyed her? Either way, tears began to explode from her eyes, so quickly that red bags were forming under them almost instantly. She then turned her back to me, all with one unseemingly unconscious spin from her body.
あのね、昼間私の頭ポンポンってした。
She seemed like she was trying her hardest not to let herself cry, though it wasn't exactly working.
あ、んなことしたか？
You did! You don't remember that! How do you not remember that? She paused, seemingly waiting for me to answer, but I had no idea what to say, and I absolutely didn't want to say the wrong thing, so I just stood there like a doll.
やっぱり覚えてないなら
Finally, she turned back to face me, her tears mostly dry. Still a little self-conscious about crying, though, she kept her eyes closed, a telltale frown belying her confidence. There was obviously something between the lines for me to read here, but hell if I knew what it was.
ああ、お前の持ってる石の片割れ。
はい。
Shinozaki removed the Ever After Stone from her pocket and placed it squarely in my hand. I positioned it next to my stone and stared intently at the two. This was the turning point. What I did next could decide our fates. I couldn't mess this up. Outside my window, I could still hear the sound of construction vehicles driving by. It was now or never. In as close to one solid motion as I could manage, I opened up my window and chucked the two stones out into the road. I timed it perfectly, and my aim couldn't have been better. Another truck was just about to pass by, and the stones were immediately in its path. The sound I heard next was a satisfying crunch. It was the sound of delicate, glass-like rocks breaking into tiny pieces. Shinozaki had rushed over to the window and directly witnessed the fate of the Ever After stones. As soon as the truck drove over them, she collapsed to her knees.
お前を守るんだ。何をしてでも。
Just slapped him! I couldn't even finish my sentence before Shinozaki's palm slammed my face with an incredible force. The loud smack of flesh on flesh echoed throughout the room. The sight of my face was immediately in pain. I began rubbing it with my hand as I looked into Shinozaki's eyes. Her face was filled with tears and her nose was running. She was breathing so heavily, her shoulders were bobbing up and down.
やっぱりあなたはどうしようもない人。
篠崎、聞いてく。
ちょっとでも信じた私がバカだった。
Dang. She was absolutely hysterical with rage.
行かせるかよ、あんなところに。
It was my turn to fire back now. I was certain I'd done the right thing.
本があるったって具体的にどこだ。一体何をするんだよ。何のプランもなしにって。
嫌い。何よバカ。アホ。うよ。
Leaving me with those hurtful words, Shinozaki then pushed past me and ran out of my room, crying like a child the whole way. I stood back up again, rubbing my cheek where I'd been slapped.
お願い。どこ？
Oh.
あった。無事だったんだ。
What? They're okay? But they were run over by a truck. He's back.
よく手段を手に入れた。論から手段。次にお前はもう飛べる。
Interesting.
パンピーどもを超越する世の断りに手を突っ込むことのできる人間だ。
教えてよ。味方。
Are you on her side? Uh-oh.
篠崎。
篠間君。
比べて。
I'm miles ahead of this trash. Uh-oh.
なんだよお前。壊れなかったのか。篠崎、渡す。
いや、
ダメだ、行くんじゃねえ。今度死にそうになれば気が済むんだよ。
いや、
渡せ。
いや。
Oh. Oh,
野生犬
interesting.
だ。歩み、味方かと聞いたな。その通り。守るものだ。俺はお前の姉、日の絵の世話になった一番弟子。矢後浦教会のキリアミストだ。
I see.
いい子だ。会場のワードは覚えているね。さて、
And Yoshiki is still against the wall. Oh.
俺にしっかり捕まってろよ。あとほら、
Oh. The Argus Cube.
ごめん。もう心配しないで。
篠崎。
お前は正しくパンピーの道を生きてろ。
I fucking hate this guy, dude.
やめて。涅槃よ。死人を迎えよ。
篠崎。
Oh, is he gonna go too then? I think he's gonna go. Oh no, he didn't. Okay.
篠崎。篠崎。そう。なんでだよ。
Okay then. All right.
ここは
So we're in Heavenly Host again. So as soon as I'm done with this batch of dialogue, I'm gonna end this one here.
この匂い。
You recognize it, don't you?
天神書だ。あれ？
He didn't go with you, I don't think.
ない。
Yeah, he has them.
あれはミスタさん。そんな。あの石がないと。あ、ミスタさん。私。また。
Yeah, you decided to go back yourself, so yeah. Should have let Yoshiki go with you.
そんなことないよ。きっと。
Oh, hi. Hi. Oh. Oh. Like a pomegranate.
お前だから。
Head so full of juice. No one is coming to save you. Die, kill. You should just die, 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 die. Okay.
いらっしゃいませ。
Okay, so you just run out of the room. Oh, I can control her now. Okay, so basically, alright. I'm gonna go ahead and save. Should be able to save, I think, unless it automatically saved. But you know what? That's fine. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this episode here. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this one up. I know this one's probably going to be about an hour long, but chapter 1, you know, gotta be. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get this edited and get this uploaded for y'all. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.